Plenty of famous people went from being loved to hated. Who is someone famous that went from being hated to loved? Story 1. Lindy Chamberlain. Her baby was eaten by wild animals, and she was mocked and ridiculed for claiming it as a defense. Heck, they even had it as a long-running gag in Buffy. Then, people found out that it was true. Story 2. Stella Liebeck. Her name is not famous, and I'm not sure she's loved, but certainly the feelings towards her famous case, the McDonald's Too Hot coffee case, have changed to be on her side in the last couple years. For so long she was mocked immensely, but in reality that coffee was too hot, so hot that her was so burnt it was fused together as a result of the horrific burns. I remember hearing about the case back in the day, and admittedly also thinking what a stupid and greedy woman to come after McDonald's, but recently I've read more about the details, and it was such a horrible incident, and many of us globally really made fun of this poor woman. Story 3. Helen Keller. We remember her as a courageous figure, someone who overcame so much and was a tireless advocate for the disabled, but during her life she was a radical socialist communist. She vehemently opposed U.S. participation in WW1, she was absolutely despised almost universally. Story 4. Paul Rubens aka Pee Wee Herman. He was a punchline through most of the 90s after he got busted for jerking off in a theater. Then everyone realized that was kind of a bullshit thing to get busted for because that was why people went to theaters in the first place. Story 5. Sinead O'Connor. Amazing voice. Nothing compares to you. One take. Wow. Small woman, a powerhouse, admired musically and for her strong personality and convictions until she ripped up a picture of the Pope on live TV. Then that strong sense of self and convictions had crossed a line and suddenly had became a liability. What does she know? She's 22, show some respect. In the end she won. She stayed her path despite the consequences and was admired, once again for that strong personality and principles prior to her death, and for being right, the Pope knew. Story 6. There was a joke on the first US incarnation of Whose Line Is It Anyway with the prompt of things that will make the audience boo. One performer mimed an award show host going, and the Oscar goes to Keanu Reeves. The audience booed with genuine hatred, which was weird because a previous joke involved shoving old ladies into traffic. I work with younger people as part of my job, so at one point I did have to tell them there was a time where Keanu Reeves was considered a joke. It was met with some pretty intense skepticism. Story 7. Paris Hilton comes to mind. I always thought she was a shrewd businesswoman playing to type, but seeing her advocate for the youth of our country and speak in front of Congress is genuinely impressive. Story 8. I don't understand it, but I guess Chris Brown. I'm always shocked after everything with Rihanna that he still pops up on the Billboard 100 and is nominated for Grammys, etc. Story 9. Bill Gates. For the most part, if you told me in the mid-90s he would be donating his wealth to research cures for diseases, I would have scoffed and called it the most far-fetched thing I've heard. Story 10. Keanu Reeves. In a sort of a way, in the late 80s early 90s he was considered a punchline of an actor, not to me I swear, but to really a lot of people. Remember Matthew Perry's gross crack on him in his memoir? That's probably why he thought it'd be okay, it's how people used to talk. Story 11. David Beckham. He was absolutely hated by the English fans during his early days, especially for his red card against Argentina. He turned it around and not just won over the football soccer fans but also became an icon. Story 12. Courtney Love. Everyone hated her after Kurt died, but then she had a glow up, won a Golden Globe Award, and everyone loved her again. She may be hated again now, not sure. Story 13. Paris Hilton. From vapid socialite to advocate against child abuse at troubled teen camps, and animal welfare advocate. Story 14. I'd say Bruce Willis. There were tons of stories about how horrible he was to work with. See Kevin Smith's rant. Then he got sick and everybody loves him now. Story 15. Our current president used to be widely regarded as a complete joke and a bumbling buffoon, but at some point a large segment of the population decided he was somehow competent enough to put in charge of the executive branch. Story 16. John Bon Jovi. Favorite punching bag of nearly every snobby rock and metal fan in the late 80s for being a cheesy faux headbanger. Decades later, even if people don't enjoy his music, most recognize that he's a hard-working performer, and seems like a genuinely decent dude. Story 17. Jimmy Carter. He never deserved the hate he got, but after his presidency he became essentially an American saint. He did so much good for the world. Story 18. Don't know about hated, but a lot of people, myself included, saw Brendan Fraser as a bit of a one-note back in the day. The Whale was not only a triumphant comeback, but completely upended my expectations of him, given his whole backstory which I was unaware of until then. I couldn't be more happy to be wrong. Story 19. Robert Downey Jr. Dude was a total train wreck in the 90s, all drugs and arrests, and people wrote him off as a washed-up has-been. Then Iron Man hits, and bam's everyone's fave comeback king, from tabloid trash to Marvel's golden boy. That glow-up's unreal. Story 20. I remember at some point Elon had almost every nerd of every category in the palm of his hand. Now only the people he hates admire him and the people he wants to appeal to hate him all. Story 21. George Foreman. He was a surly, nasty young fighter. After he retired, put his name on a portable grill, and smiled. All of a sudden he's the housewife's hero. Story 22. Sean Murray, the lead developer at Hello Games who made No Man's Sky. The game was hyped and overpromised, and when it launched it was pretty much missing almost everything that was initially shown in gameplay videos. He kept his mouth shut. His team went to work improving the game and they haven't stopped for 8 years now. The game and the opinion of Sean and his team has gone from massively hated to almost universally loved. Story 23 Anne Hathaway, for some reason that is completely beyond me. People hated her in the mid-2010s. I have never understood why anyone would harbor a strong emotion towards her that isn't based in admiration, because she's never come off as anything but a sweetheart. We all know she's talented, she's pretty, she seems very smart, she's charismatic, so what was it? Why did people hate her? She seems like such an authentic person in Hollywood. It boggles my mind how anyone could hate her. Fortunately, in the past few years I've seen the tables turn and people just love her again. Like, welcome back to the winning team. Story 24 Leonardo DiCaprio, for sure. I remember the jokes about him around the time of Titanic, at least some of which revolved around his masculinity. Starting with Gangs of New York, and through Blood Diamond and The Departed, he really turned his image around and became a very respected actor. Winona Ryder, maybe. She was a joke in the late 1990s, and she generally respected now. Story 25 Winston Churchill. Following the failed landings in the Dardanelles in WW1, and the huge loss of life, he was pretty much a pariah in UK society. Then came WW2, and the rest, as they say, is history. Story 26 Sinead O'Connor took the trip each way, released a great song, told the truth about abuse cover-ups in the Catholic Church, got hated for it by people that just thought she was attacking religion, was gradually proven to be absolutely right and respected for her stand. Story 27 John McEnroe Andre Agassi, both champions but not really liked in their time for their on-court antics, but both respected now for their commentary insights. Seems to happen to a lot of sports people though. Story 28 Gary Barlow. For those in the UK, this was the ultimate role reversal where he went from being a national joke to a national treasure, untouchable by today's standards. Story 29 Radio stations burned Sinead O'Connor's records after she tore up a picture of Pope John Paul II on SNL to protest child abuse by Catholic priests. Numerous media outlets and celebrities lambasted her, with some even threatening physical violence against her. Turns out she was right all along. Story 30 Lindsay Lohan, mocked for being a party girl and always drinking, also wearing her prison ankle bracelet. Now she is married and everyone loves her for her reinvention. Story 31 It seems like around Geely, Ben Affleck was the pop culture punching bag of the world. He was the butt of every flop joke. I remember forums asking if he had ever been in a legit good movie, and of course South Park roasted him, but then he started directing, got acclaim, and anymore it seems like generally he's well received. Story 32 Very small scale, but Tom Sandoval won over a lot of people when he was on The Traitors recently after being pretty universally reviled for cheating on his girlfriend on TV. Story 33 Justin Bieber. I grew up with a lot of people that literally hated him growing up, but now it's just sympathy for what he had to go through in the music industry. Story 34 Hate might be a strong word, but Steve Irwin was mostly seen as a joke and a reckless idiot when he was alive. Now he's pretty much universally viewed as a saint on the internet. Story 35 Keanu Reeves was despised in the 90s, up until the mid-2000s. Then something happened, I don't know what, but suddenly he came like, ironic or something, people started liking him. He's always been a good guy, and he's always been a terrible actor. The only difference is now people know him more for being a good guy than they do about talking about how he can't act. Story 36 Martha Mitchell. When she made jokes about Nixon's political enum IES, the lefties saw air as just another part of the Nixon maladministration, but when they found out she was drugged and restrained after the Watergate scandals, they made her such a martyr. Story 37 Snoop Dogg sorta. At least where I am he was the symbol of weed, drugs and crime, the nightmare of a mid-90s mom. Now he uses the same haircut of a 8-year-old girl. Story 38 Yelena Dokic. When she quit Australia, she was practically chased out of the country with pitchforks, but then hearing just how much abuse she endured has made all of Australia want to give her a hug and say sorry, especially me. Story 39 Kristen Stewart was dragged after US Weekly published pictures of her affair with her married director. At that time, she and Robert Pattinson lived together, which is why all the Treehards lost there. She kept her head down afterward and just continued to act in smaller indie films. It felt like after her role in Spencer as Princess Diana really turned a page of rehabilitating her image. Justin Bieber. I feel like we used to love hating on him when he was a kid because he was annoying, but then it turned out, he actually made some pretty good music and seems pretty chill. Story 40 U.S. President Jimmy Carter. While in office he was reviled for the stagnant economy, sky-high gas prices, and the Iranian hostage crisis. After his presidency this selfless, kind, charitable soul is considered widely as a saint. Story 41 George Bush. I couldn't believe how stupid and dangerous it was possible to be as president, but I'd have him back in a heartbeat over the current orangutan. Story 42 Keanu Reeves. When he was young people hated his acting. It wasn't until The Matrix he became liked, then we found out what a good person he is and he became loved. Story 43 Maybe Jim Carrey. If you were over a certain age when he first got big you probably found him obnoxious, and actors used to complain that he was a pain to work with, but his antics grew on people and he seemed to wisen up and mature as the years went on. Story 44 Mr. T for me. First time I saw him he was Clubber Lang, the anti-hero to our beloved Rocky Balboa, then as B.A. Baracus from the A-Team he kicked. I seem to recall a presence on WWF 2. Finally, after a cartoon show and breakfast cereal campaign, Mr. tea was no longer bought, was good. Story 45. Stephen King, not hated exactly, but disparaged by the literati, especially in the 1970s and 1980s. Anyone who dismisses him now as a writer has clearly never read his work. Bob Dylan, too. It took him close to 50 years before he stopped being seen as a passing fad protest singer. And I'm so glad they are both still around to enjoy the genuine and near-universal respect. Story 46. Robert Downey Jr., once notorious for his drug troubles and erratic behavior that almost derailed his career, he managed a stunning comeback thanks largely to his iconic role as Iron Man. His transformation from a troubled actor to one of Hollywood's most beloved and highest-paid stars is often cited as one of the industry's most remarkable turnarounds. Story 47. Gonna say Robert Downey Jr., our drugs etc., he was washed up, until Elton John gave him a break on a music video, which he nailed big time. People started hiring him again. The rest is history. Story 48. Miley Cyrus. I remember her being more of the punchline of a joke in school and having to be embarrassed to watch Hannah Montana, but she seems to be more of an empowering icon now to everyone. Story 49. Nigella Lawson. Lord Saatchi leaked to the press she'd done cocaine with her ex-husband when he was terminally ill as a distraction from when he was photographed literally strangling her in public. They were going through a divorce at the time and the press jumped on Nigella for doing cocaine as though it justified Saatchi attacking her like that. The British press have had some low days but seemed to take a lot of people a while to catch up that Nigella was a victim. Story 50. Paris Hilton. She was absolutely abhorred when she first hit the scene, due to her being the very definition of a spoiled rich kid who was famous for nothing more than being famous. But now it's become clear that she was exploited to the nth degree when she was barely old enough to make her own decisions, and the public seems to have warmed to her to some extent. Story 51. Not to be the Debbie Downer feminist, but a lot of the folks listed on here and the ones I thought of were the result of misogyny and the changes of our culture away from that. The woke mob wins again. These two weren't hated but definitely considered a huge joke. Dolly and Cher. Every comedian had some gag about their surgeries and their bodies. Nowadays culture has shifted away from deriding those choices and re-embraced them and their legacies. But yeah, lots of shaming, lots of body shaming, lots of mental breakdown shaming, lots of homophobia, lots of just all of the normal human things. It's in no way perfect, but we certainly wouldn't see a late-night talk show host make jokes in that light. Story 52. Spider-Man. Turns out he wasn't the menace the media and newspapers were painting him as. He was just a normal guy trying to be responsible with his power. Story 53. For actors. I think Matthew McConaughey and Robert Pattinson. They got mocked for their roles in rom-com movies and Twilight respectively, but they moved away from that and took other acting roles and turned out to be decent actors. Story 54. Guy Fieri. People used to mock him but over time he has revealed himself as a great guy. Like when he officiated 100 gay weddings, I feel like even his bleach blonde hair and flame shirts seem endearing now. Story 55. Jimmy Carter. First person I voted for since I was eligible at 18. I have defended him for almost 5 decades now from clowns that said we survived Jimmy Carter. We will survive every president since. When he was dying people finally changed their minds about him being the worst president ever. Took y'all long enough. Story 56. Robert Downey Jr. He seemed promising in the 90s until he got into a bunch of trouble for bad behavior fueled by drugs and booze. He kind of fell off the map for a long while until Iron Man. Story 57. Does everyone still hate Anne Hathaway? I remember for a while there the internet was obsessed with hating her, for reasons which I think boiled down to basically she is an annoying theater kid. Story 58. Robert Downey Jr. was a cracked-out wastoid, always in the tabloids for getting arrested while on drugs, and movies after the 80s were just seemed like an entitled at every appearance, and then the 2000s he takes a turn, and does some amazing work. Enter Iron Man. Story 59. Post Malone. Being a part of mumble rap and having a ton of tattoos made him look like but enough has come out about the good things that he's done that he definitely has a positive public impression. Story 60. George Foreman, who recently passed away, was a villain in heavyweight boxing in the 70s. When he made his comeback in the 80s and 90s, he was beloved. Story 61. Among politicians, sadly, winning a war ushers anyone to greatness. At least for a while Lincoln, elected with 39% of the popular vote, fought a war that wasn't popular nor was he until he clearly was going to win it. Among despots and royals, we occasionally witness a journey from early years of severe repression and purges to late years seemingly devoted to creating a more palatable legacy. Henry VIII used and discarded wives, only to become his country's most honored religious figure. Among athletes, it's those who at first didn't live up to high expectations, then found a way, or got a second chance to shine, and did. Stafford and Darnold provide recent examples. Finally we have bad guys who flip and fight for us. A lot of them are fictional, a few are biblical. Story 62. G.G. Allin. People used to say they never heard of him or that they hated his music, but these last few years I've noticed quite a few people have been fans forever. Story 63. The Rock was a very unpopular wrestler. He got pushed heavily by Vince McMahon. People didn't like him and then all of a sudden he was doing juice commercials and movies and then he was a big star, and then they gave him his own wrestling show, but in the early years he was just awful, but there were some good years in between. Story 64. Back in the mid-90s a lot of people hated Charles Barkley, bar fights, throwing a guy through a window, the I am not a role model thing, just generally being kinda an Now he's every NBA fan's uncle. Story 65 John Cena. He blew up once he became a heel with a rap gimmick, which made people love the character. They decided to turn him face and kept him that way for 20 years, making him the face of the company. However, during this time he was being shoved down fans' throats. Add on that he was a bit of an where head pull rank and get outcomes changed along with other things, and the fans truly did not like him anymore due to overexposure. After leaving for Hollywood and not wrestling often, IDs say he was less than part-time. He returned at Money in the Bank in 2021 in Dallas. I was at that show and the roof of the arena blew off when his music hit. He even commented on it saying, "I'm so used to you guys saying this is his last year wrestling before retirement and they finally turned him heel, so fans obviously don't like him right now after being a good guy for so long, but he's a perfect example for this prompt." Story 66 John Lydon, aka Johnny Rotten, a shock to the nation in the 70s. National treasure these days. One of the few who called out Jimmy Savile while he was still alive. Story 67 David Beckham was burnt in effigy after getting sent off at the World Cup, went on to become England captain and a pretty good ambassador for the game. Story 68 for the English David Beckham. People were burning effigies of the guy and sending death threats to his family after getting sent off for kicking an Argentinian player at the 1998 World Cup. He was the most hated man in the country. Every match he played he would get destroyed by the crowd, and the media was all over him. Then he was made captain by the new manager, raised his game significantly, and pretty much single-handedly dragged the team to the finals in 2002, scored and won against Argentina, celebrated like a madman, redemption arc complete. Story 69 Phil Collins, seen as the personification of the bland 80s MOR sound. Bowie referred to his own 80s popularity as his Phil Collins years, reviled for divorcing his wife by facts not true and being a supporter of Thatcher not true, but many of his contemporaries were including Rod Stewart, Mercury, Daltrey, and didn't receive half as much criticism. Now in poor health and seen as a bit of a treasure, and he was always an incredible drummer.